I'm not usually one for Christmas or anything of the sorts, but in the year 2000 the world was gifted a cinematic masterpiece, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, starring Jim Carrey and Taylor Momsen, in this classic retelling of a Dr. Seuss tale. Aside from the unrealistic ending, I loved every second of this one. Flash forward 5 years, here comes V for Vendetta, or at least the filmic adaptation of it. This retelling of one of my favorite graphic novels pits Hugo Weaving and Natalie Portman as the main characters, also known as V and Evie, against the tyrannical government of a subdued England. But since you clicked on this video, you're probably wondering why I'm rambling about two different movies. Tone, style, themes, different, right? Well, just hear me out. I'm about to tell you why How the Grinch Stole Christmas and V for Vendetta are the same movie. Now, before you dismiss this as some crazy conspiracy theory, which, let's be honest, it probably is, just listen to some all too freaky coincidences. To begin, let's look at the film's two main characters, the Grinch and V. Initially, the two don't seem to have any real connection, until you remember that they're both the protagonist of the films and also the master of their craft. By that, I mean that the Grinch is the only one in or outside of Whoville that is capable of bringing destruction to Christmas. And V, the only one in or outside of England capable of bringing destruction to the Northfire, the corrupt government of said England. What this means in relation to How the Grinch Stole Christmas and V for Vendetta is that both the Grinch and V respectively serve the same purpose in their film, dismantling some sort of social or physical construct that they deem unnecessary or evil. This same fact becomes even more apparent when you look at the two people that the Grinch and V choose to take under their wing. That is, Cindy Lou Who and Evie Hammond. Cindy and Evie are the archetypes that allow the Grinch and V to connect to their versions of the real world. By that, I mean that these characters give their protagonists perspective into the world that they have become detached from. Cindy is the first person to enter the Grinch's lair and provide him some feeling, no matter how slight, of the Christmas spirit, made apparent by her lack of crippling fear. Evie, on the other hand, helps V to see humanity of the citizens in London. Her willingness to help in V's endeavors shows V that the population may be more open to his plan than he initially proposed. Instead of only toppling the Northfire by brute force, maybe popular opinion can play a role. So what about everyone else? What about the citizens of Whoville? Of London? The general cast of extra citizens in these films serve as cannon fodder at times, sure, but without them, the plans of the protagonists and apprentices simply cannot function. For the Grinch, without Cindy's reputation among the people in Whoville, our green friend never would have been elected holiday cheermeister and brought to town centre to join in the festivities. For V, if not for the changing opinion of the British people coming around to the thought of anarchy done right, the Northfire could have easily killed V in the London Underground and snuffed out any of his further plans. Okay, the everyone else in these scenarios seem like throwaway characters, but truthfully, they are the third pillar to my argument. But let's get back to the main attraction, the title characters that we say are the same at heart. And if we're to assume that the Grinch and V are at least similar, we need to look at what initiated their change to their anti-authoritarian state. In both cases, the traumatic inciting event happened earlier in their lives before the events of their films. For the Grinch, the problem came in the form of a child version of Mayor Mayhew. When the Grinch gives Martha May a gift, Mayhew convinces the class of children to turn and make fun of the Grinch and his horrible attempt at shaving. The Grinch flies into a rage, destroying the Christmas decorations and thus declaring his disdain for the holiday that Whoville is built around. Similarly with V, it is revealed in the film that he was a prisoner at Larkhill, where he was a victim of scientific experiments in order to manufacture bioorganic weapons. Somehow, the experiments gave V certain superhuman abilities that allowed him to break out of his prison. He disappears and begins planning his magnum opus that the film centers around. The Grinch and V are victims of horrible events, granted one may be a bit more extreme than the other. Regardless, without these actions taken against our protagonists, they would not have had the opportunities to mold into who they are. Furthermore, the two have similar tendencies in their techniques. While they do live away from the concentrated area of people, the Grinch and V have their own more or less hidden lairs on the outskirts of town. The Grinch on Mount Crumpet and V in the London Underground. Close enough to keep an eye on the people they are trying to attack, but far enough to stay relatively undetected. Now back to Cindy and Evie. But instead of first looking at their relationship to their protagonists, let's look at how they met. Cindy and Evie met the main characters during a time of major struggle. Cindy was visiting her father in the mailroom when the appearance of the Grinch made her fall into the highly dangerous gift machine. She saved at the last minute before the Grinch escapes into the Christmas chaos. Evie was also saved by her protagonist. She was walking around in London after curfew and was approached by fingermen, government agents, with not the best of intentions. V attacks them before giving an encapsulating speech as an introduction. I'd argue that both of the apprentices begin to form some sort of connection to their counterparts, partly due to their rescue, but also in a way that allows Evie and Cindy to feel that they can help their protagonist that has become so detached from the reality of the world. You see, the Grinch and V see the world as very black and white, cut and dry, when in reality the people of Whoville didn't exile the Grinch. It's in the same way that the people of London didn't imprison V. Regardless, these people are caught in the middle of each of the Master's plan. V and the Grinch are driven by their desire for vengeance and, in some way, their own twisted sense of redemption. Take, for example, the scene where Cindy presents the Grinch with the award of Holiday Cheermeister. He isn't concerned with winning, but only that he beat others in Whoville. Similarly, when he reads the names of Whoville citizens, he expresses hatred for some he has never even met, all due to some unfortunate incident during his childhood. V, on the other hand, shows a bit more of an open interpretation of the British people, giving them the choice to join him on November 5th, as seen in his speech that is broadcasted all over the country. So, sure, there are a few differences, but let me get into one important piece that we've been ignoring until now: the objects of rage. Jeffrey Tambor as Mayor Mayhew and John Hurts, Chancellor Sutler. Now, I know what you're thinking. Mayhew and Sutler weren't the only ones that were responsible for what happened, and to that I'd say, you're kinda right. However, the facilitators must hold some responsibility in these situations. Of course, we need to consider people like Mayhew's assistants and classmates, Peter Creedy, Louis Prothero, Delia Surridge, and other Norse Fire officials. While only a few may have committed the crimes against our lovable main characters, the governmental bodies are built around their indiscretions. Mayhew's arrogance and lustful desire for Martha, along with Sutler's absence of regard for humanity and insatiable hunt for power, emanate to all those around them, corrupting the minds of the civilizations and thus building the mold for insurrection-like characters like V and the Grinch. In the same sense, V and the Grinch emanate their own ideologies to people like Cindy and Evie, allowing them to make decisions for themselves and help to influence the people of Whoville and London. And if you're still not convinced and you're still looking for that inspiration, take a look at the endings for each film. The same people that were caught in the middle of the Master's plans are the same ones celebrating its victory. And not only celebrating, but celebrating with the Master and the Apprentice, the Grinch and Cindy, V and Evie. Without the plans of the protagonists, nothing would have changed, and without the help of the Apprentice to connect to the civilians, the plans would have fallen through. The Norse Fire is toppled, and the people of London experience freedom. And while Christmas is still in place, it is much more loving to those different and who don't conform to a so-called normality. So with that, I hope that if you're not convinced, you at least understood and will go watch these two juggernauts of films once more. But really, no matter how many people tell you that you're nuts for thinking that the Grinch and V are the same, never forget that ideas are bulletproof.